We have breaking news going on all over the place this afternoon, all of it having to do with general assistance medical care. We're going to start here in the House, the Senate and the House right now are busy working on trying to find some sort of solution with Governor Pawlenty. There's a meeting going on.
Put us on a sustainable footing
for
a long term.
You can hear it in the background going on right now.
So I'm wondering if this
it's on our Senate channel at theuptake.org. But Senator Linda Berglund and several others are meeting what's called the General Assistance Medical Care Working Group, trying to come up with a solution because the Governor Tim Pawlenty, vetoed the money for it, and the House has not been able to override his veto. And so lots of people are being auto-enrolled into MNCare, which is costing the state a lot more and covering a lot fewer people. So that's going on. And we'll be following that throughout the hour. But also going on here at the same time is a lawsuit that was filed just a little while ago today in Ramsey County District Court having to do with general assistance medical care and saying that what the governor did is unconstitutional. If that sounds familiar, it is the same argument that was being used when another lawsuit was filed that's going to the Minnesota Supreme Court. Was filed also in Ramsey County District Court late last year. And that case is still plunking along and is going to be heard in front of the Supreme Court in just a few weeks. Joining me now to talk about this latest suit and maybe how the two are related is attorney David Lillihaug, who is on the line. David, welcome to the program.
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
I am doing...
You can't tell a lawsuit without a program.
That's right, and our chief program guy here is David Lillihaug, who knows one lawsuit from another, certainly. I have been able to read very little about this latest lawsuit, other than I know it's three people who have filed. It's a class action lawsuit, and it is basically naming the governor, Cal Ludeman, and I'm forgetting our budget guy, Tom.
Commissioner Tom Hansen.
Thank you, Tom Hansen, as the target of this. And these are people, I think, who are in general assistance medical care. What do you know about the suit?
Well, what I know is that it was filed mid-afternoon by Legal Aid. Legal Aid is the same group that filed a lawsuit back in November representing a class of people who had lost their special diet program because of what Governor Pawlenty did in unallotting the funds. And do you want me to take just a second and kind of go through the history of this
let's do that
first?
Let's do that.
Okay.
Context is a good thing.
Yeah, we start back in November with Legal Aid representing people whose diet program had been cut off by unallotment. And they won. On December 31, Chief Judge Kathleen Guerin in Ramsey County District Court issued an order finding that Governor Pawlenty had violated the unallotment statute and violated the Minnesota Constitution with his massive unallotment. And remember, it was $2.5 billion that he unilaterally cut. So that case then goes quickly up to the Minnesota Supreme Court. Now, in the meantime, you would think that with the governor having received a ruling that what he did was unlawful, that he would undo all his unallotments. But no, he did not. He only undid the unallotment for the special diet program. So now we fast forward to the legislative session, and we remember that he unallotted 3 months of general assistance medical care, and he vetoed the entire second year of GAMC. Now, what's the significance of that? Well, GAMC serves the poorest of poor Minnesotans. The people who are on GAMC have an average income of about $225 a month. Now, for those of us who have bread on our table every day, let's understand what that means. That means they're getting about $8 a day, and they're living on that. And so when they get sick, many of them are chemically dependent, many of them are veterans, they need to go to the hospital, and even a very small copay that we would happily pay is just out of reach for them. And it's that group of people that we're talking about here. That is the group of people that Governor Pawlenty wants to move on to another health care program. And you're right, Mike, that would be more expensive, and it also requires copays and caps on coverage that just make it impossible for people to survive. And so the legislature did pass a bill, overwhelmingly, by the way, in a bipartisan way, to reform and extend GAMC. Governor Pawlenty vetoed it. And then, mostly Republicans, flip-flopped and voted to uphold his veto. So that's the context we find ourselves in. And the reason this is now a crisis is that starting on Saturday, it is the intention of the Department of Human Services to reprogram the computers and give these poorest of the poor people notice that they're no longer going to be on GAMC. That's the crisis here. And that's why legal aid went to court today to try to stop it. I hope and expect that there will be a hearing tomorrow, and I'm hoping that it will be Chief Judge Guerin and that she will say, look, I've already ruled that this unallotment was unlawful, so Governor and Commissioners, you cannot go ahead and do this to these poor people.
So the hearing's tomorrow. Is this a request?
Well, I don't know. We don't know that.
We don't know
that. It
that.
hasn't been scheduled yet. I'm hoping, though, that it will be tomorrow because Saturday is the day when the computers start getting reprogrammed.
And I have not seen the lawsuit. I don't know if you've seen the details on it. Is this asking for a restraining order, a temporary restraining order, to stop what's going on?
It is. It is asking for a declaration that the governor's unallotments, including this one, are illegal, and it is asking for an injunction or temporary restraining order to stop the Department of Human Services from taking people off GAMC and trying to move them onto another program. Now, by the way, when I say move on to another program, only some of the people on GAMC would get that benefit, and for many of them, that's about the last thing they need. We need to preserve GAMC. We need to preserve health care for the poorest of poor people in the state of Minnesota.
So let's say this does get expedited, because it sounds like there's some sort of urgency, and it sounds like the judge has dealt with this before. If indeed the I'm doing speculation here, but just what's the most logical progression of what's going to happen? If the judge were to say, yes, this is some sort of emergency, we are going to issue a restraining order, does that mean, what does that mean? What does that do to the whole system?
It means we buy another month, essentially. There is enough money in the GAMC account to keep the program running for at least another month. That will buy the legislature some time to try to negotiate with this governor, who is very, very difficult to negotiate with, and try to arrive at some solution that will extend a GAMC into the future. Now, there's a lot of concern at the grassroots about this. Religious leaders are active, heads of hospitals, all kinds of provider groups are calling their legislators and saying, look, we need GAMC. We need to have it extended. And if there is this temporary restraining order, then at least it will give the legislature and all the grassroots people some additional time to try to get enough legislators to overturn the governor's veto or to get him to back off what has been a truly intransigent position.
Now, I was just listening to the General Assistance Medical Care Working Group that's meeting right now. Representative Paul Thiessen very much objected to the word negotiate when it was talking about what was going on with the governor, because he says that is not what is going on. He said what is going on is a presentation of ideas, and nobody's negotiating with anybody, apparently. But that aside, this case, if indeed we have an injunction of some sort, is this something that, I mean, it sounds so similar to the case that is in front of the Supreme Court.
It's totally the same issue, Mike. The issue is, did the governor unallot pursuant to law, or did he exceed his power? And it is exactly that same issue that was argued before Chief Judge Guerin back in November. I was in the courtroom for that argument. And when you look at that complaint and you look at this most recent complaint, I mean, paragraph by paragraph, a lot of it is the same. The only difference is, back in November, it was the special diet program. This time around, it's GAMC and a lot more money.
So the question is, does something like that become part of the case that's in front of the Supreme Court, or does everybody say, well, you know, we're going to see what the court rules, and that will have a bearing on this case, or what's likely to happen?
What legal aid is doing is saying to the judge, issue the same kind of order that you did back in December and keep GAMC going for another month. The first case is going to be argued in the Minnesota Supreme Court on Monday, March 15th.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I can't predict how long it's going to take for the court to rule, but everybody hopes that it will be pretty quickly. And it would be my hope, at least, that if the Minnesota Supreme Court does, in fact, affirm Judge Guerin and rule that Governor Pawlenty's unallotment was illegal, that the governor might then finally get the message and unwind all of his unallotments. Now, that's going to leave the state with an enormous fiscal hole.
Oh, yeah.
We know that, but everybody knew that going into the legislative session in 2009. And so it's a problem that needs to be solved because the Minnesota Constitution says at the end of a biennium, a 2-year budget cycle, in this case the middle of 2011, the budget has to be balanced. So there's going to be a lot of pain, but the real question is, how are we going to deal with the pain? Are we going to do it through our normal democratic process where a legislature passes laws and the governor signs or vetoes them, or are we going to do it through this thing called unallotment, which is, in my judgment, a very significant abuse of gubernatorial power?
Now, the governor, if this, I'm taking it all the way to the end here. The governor, let's say all the rulings go against him. He has to negotiate with the legislature because the legislature is in session. He just can't say, well, I'm going to unallot again because now we're at a point where we're in a big fiscal hole.
Well, or he can decide not to negotiate with the legislature, and then at some point the state is going to have a real cash flow problem and have to start borrowing money. I think we're already doing some of that in very strange ways, borrowing really from the school districts.
That's right.
By not passing on aid to them, borrowing from cities and counties. But the state may have to borrow in a more systematic way, and it can do that, but it has to have a balanced budget by the end of this biennium, which would be June 30th of 2011. Now, by that time, we're going to have a new governor, and maybe that will be part of the solution to the problem.
That might solve the entire, well, not solve the entire problem, but certainly make a path to a solution a lot easier. David Lillihaug, attorney, always keeping an eye on these things. We really appreciate your input on this, and we'll keep in touch with you on this one.
My pleasure, Mike. I'll be in the courtroom in the Supreme Court on March 15th.